So again, in this video we're going to talk about the router and the shader and how they relate to each other. Now the router is kind of like the traffic cop of the control room. So it can take any source that's in the studio and send it anywhere you want it to go, whatever destination that might be. And that is helpful for when we're using the shader. Now the shader is what we use to adjust the brightness, the darks, as well as the color balance of all the cameras in the studio. And we're going to need to use the router to help us do that. So let's get started. All right, so here we are with the router. Like I said, the router is kind of like your traffic cop, kind of acts like a switchboard. You just kind of pick your source and the destination, and you can connect them together. And this router does that for a lot of different sources and a lot of different destinations. So it actually has quite a few uses. Just one I'm going to talk about is the teleprompter. So the teleprompter we talk about in another video. But what you might want to do is send the teleprompter, the script, to one of the cameras. All right? So that means our destination is the camera and our source is the teleprompter. So I'll just follow the directions on the screen. It's pretty easy. So here we are. Maybe I'll do camera 2. And if I want to send the prompter, I come over here to prompter A. All right? And so that'll make the prompter show up on camera 2 as long as the prompter is hooked up. I can do that for a lot of other things. So let's say I have the large monitor hooked up in the studio, and I want to send out what the program screen is showing me to the large monitor. So that means I just go to Mon 1, assuming it's plugged into the first port on the bulkhead. And then I come down here and I find program. Here it is. Switcher 1, program out. So now I'm sending the program out to the monitor. So it's as simple as that. Just follow the directions, choose your destination, and then choose your source. All right, so here we are over at the shader. So the shader is the job of the technical director, okay? So the technical director, it's their job to make sure that every camera's brightness or exposure, as well as the darks and the color balance, all look good and look copacetic with each other. So it's not just important to get a good looking shot on each camera, but they should all kind of look the same, like they're happening in the same space. And in order to help us do that the best, we had every camera in the studio set to the same shot of Eric sitting here waiting for us to start the show. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to shade every single camera to look good and the same. All right. So over here on the board, we have a lot of knobs here. We're not going to use most of them. All of the ones on the top here, including these color ones, these are all primarily set by engineering. Not too often are you going to need to adjust those. If you come in and the white balance seems off, you can ask somebody in production services to help you white balance the image. But generally speaking, that stuff should be set before you come in. Here on the lower end, that's where you're going to be doing most of your work. So right now we have cameras 1, 2, 3, and 4. Cameras 5 and 6, those are the ones that are up in the rafters. And those you can't change the exposure. What you see is what you get with those. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch all of the irises from auto to manual. So here I go. And you should see the image on each of the cameras get quite a bit darker. Okay, and now I'm just going to work my way down the line, adjusting each camera, and I'm going to use the router to help me do that. So first, I'm going to do camera 1. So that means I'm going to tell the router to show me camera 1 on the shader screen. And then I always adjust the iris first, and then I adjust the blacks. All right? So let's look a little bit more closely on how you get a good image. We'll do that with camera 2. So I'll tell the router again to send me camera 2. So here we are, camera 2. It looks pretty dark, yeah? So let's go ahead and brighten up the image with the iris knob. Now the reason that we stayed on a medium shot of Eric is that we want to really focus on his skin tone. We don't really worry too much about whether or not, the scenery is well exposed. We want to make sure the people who should be the focus of the show are the parts that look best. So when I look at him, I'll adjust the iris so that he looks kind of like he does to me in real life. So you don't want to go too far, and you don't want to underdo it. All right? Sometimes I find it good to kind of go to the extreme and then to scale back. So something like this looks good to me. So now if I'm happy with the iris, I can move over to the black, the master black. And same with this. I mean, you don't want to do too much. A little dab will do you. You could go too far. If I go too far, you see the blacks look really harsh. The contrast seems kind of severe. So I'm just going to make it just a little bit. Something like that looks good to me. And so now I just want to make sure that every camera matches this one. So now we'll move over to camera 3. I'll adjust the brightness and the darks. And I'll look over at the large monitor over there that shows me all the cameras at once. I'll use that as my guide to make sure that they're all looking similar. I think they do. All right, and then now I'm going to move on to camera 4. So I'll tell the shader I want to see camera 4. All right, so here at camera 4, I'm going to talk a little bit about this waveform monitor that you might have noticed at the bottom of the screen. So this, if you look, is kind of a visual representation of the brights and the darks in the image. So the brighter my image, kind of the more little green pixels start hopping up there. And the darker the image, the lower they fall. All right? So this can be a helpful tool, but you also don't want to stay married to it. You do want to follow your eye and choose what looks good. But general rule of thumb, people's skin tone should usually hit around the 80-point mark. That means it's a well-exposed image. And it's always good to have a little bit of the image kind of hitting that 0, that black line. All right. And now I'm just making sure that they all kind of look like they go together. And I think they do. Okay, so that's every camera shaded in the studio. So that's the router and the shader. So remember, with the router, you always want to choose your destination first and then choose your source. And then for the shader, remember that you want all the cameras to look good together, not just by themselves. And also, if you ever have any troubles with the color balance on the camera, with the white balance, you could always ask for help from somebody in production services. There's always going to be a staff member here whenever you have to troubleshoot something like that. All right, see you in the next one.